Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So Douglas Murray was recently on Piers Morgan's show. I've made several videos now talking about certain topics that were covered when Piers Morgan was interviewing Douglas Murray and Douglas Murray doing what Douglas Murray does best. And I've mentioned the fact that Douglas Murray is a very smart, wise individual, and there's really not much at all that I disagree with Douglas on. And that's why Douglas has got my immense amount of respect, because the way he's able to convey messages, to me at least, is spot on. And I only wish that I could convey messages and my reason behind things equally as good as what Douglas Murray can do, because he's just absolutely fantastic. And I love listening to the man. I can't get enough of listening to him because he's just so bright and so brilliant and really wise. And one of the things that he's most known for these days is his thoughts on the Israel and Hamas conflict. He's obviously siding with Israel, which I think is fantastic. And he destroys and obliterates a lot of the arguments from the other side, which seemingly, free Palestine. You have all these protests in the streets, virtue signaling and chanting free Palestine, whatever, what have you. And look, Douglas is he's no dummy. Like, he knows what's going on in Israel. He knows that Israel is not entirely innocent in this event at all, especially with the retaliation. But what else is Israel going to do? You've got a terrorist organization that has taken over like all the Palestinian people, as it would seem. I know not all the Palestinians are Hamas supporters or sympathizers or whatever else, but we don't know how many are supporters and how many aren't. That's where it becomes a very confusing thing to actually talk about. But nevertheless, what Douglas has seen and what he's spoken about, I think it's very important that we all listen to what he has to say. He's been there. He's covered a lot of the horrific events that have taken place since October 7th. And look, I wouldn't like to be in Netanyahu's shoes at the moment, because it wouldn't be an easy thing knowing how to deal with all the hate and all the vitriol being thrown at you. We have people saying that it's a genocide and, kids being killed left, right, and center and things like that. But when you've got, I know it's sad and it's horrific, and I hate the innocent lives being lost. And it is incredibly devastating that is all taking place. It's just an unfortunate reality of our world today. When evil exists, good has to try and remove evil. And sometimes being good has consequences, and it's hard to explain, right? And that's why I wish I could talk like Douglas Murray, because it'd be so much easier. But I'm doing my best, my friends. But anyway, getting to today's interview, or section of the interview that Douglas spoke with Piers Morgan, he really gives Piers Morgan a masterclass on the whole Israel-Palestine conflict at the moment. And Piers Morgan, obviously, he's been covering a lot of this. He's been interviewing a lot of people. I've seen quite a few of the interviews, by the way, and listened to a lot of the talking points. And look, some people make sense. Other people, they just hate Israel and they're just anti-Semitic and things like that. But you have people like Douglas Murray that actually comes in with logic, reason, and rationale, and I appreciate that enormously. So have a watch of Douglas Murray giving Piers Morgan a major masterclass in how to deal with this Israel-Palestine conflict.
Do you not feel that something has to give here, that this has to get resolved somehow, and that the only way to do that is, as with all these situations, you have to eventually compromise in some way? And the problem for Netanyahu is that people think he is completely incapable of offering Hamas any compromise, and therefore there is no deal. So the families of the hostages still there, and hundreds of thousands of protesters in Israel on the street to Tel Aviv right now, they are of the firm belief that it's his own intractable position on this, which is not going to allow any kind of ceasefire to be achievable.
But there again, if I can say so, Piers, it's the same thing, which is the presumption that it's Netanyahu who is uncompromising. We end up with this, again, because Netanyahu is a democratically elected leader, and so it's assumed that some pressure can be brought to bear on him. In my view, it is not Netanyahu who's uncompromising. It's Hamas that's uncompromising. They could have handed back the hostages last October. They could have not done this. I mean, they could have tried to build a state since 2005 when Israel withdrew from the Gaza and handed the place over to them. Hamas could have used the billions of dollars and pounds and euros that British and European and American taxpayers gave them since 2006. They could have used those billions of dollars to build up Gaza. They could have made a booming, in the good sense of the term, Mediterranean paradise. They could have created wealth for their people, but you know what they did? They built down instead of upwards. They built a tunnel network bigger than the London Underground for all of those years, and they squirreled away the money, just like Yasser Arafat did before them, and they made themselves rich. Why was Ismail Haniyeh worth billions of dollars? Why does Khaled Mashal, why is he worth billions of dollars? Why are their children like princelings who live in apartment complexes in Doha? Because they took the money of Americans and Brits and Europeans and they took it for themselves and kept the people of Gaza in immiseration and poverty. There has been since 2005 a complete counterfactual of what could have happened. But the Hamas leadership didn't want that. They have said themselves they want to use Palestinian children and their lives in order to pressurize the world. These are fanatics. They want the death of their own citizens. In order to get world opinion turned against Israel. Again, how do you negotiate with that? The assumption always is in the West today, because we're so sort of fat and lazy in our expectation that peace is the norm, and that historically it's the norm. We're so full of our own expectations and presumptions that we always think that wars end by some kind of compromise and coming around the table, to use the cliche. They don't. Historically, most wars end because one side wins and one side loses. And one of the reasons, in my view, why there is this endless rounds of war in this region is because the Israelis are never allowed to win, and Hamas, in this case, are always allowed to draw. And I think that that is simply to set up the precursor for the next conflict. If Hamas come out of this with a fighting capability, then there will be another round of this war in a couple of years. So when David Lammy and others say what we need to have is a peace deal, I'd say on what terms? Everybody wants peace except for Hamas and the fanatics. Everybody else wants peace. All of these people in the south, these kibbutzniks and the party goers and others who were murdered on the 7th, all dreamed of peace with their Palestinian neighbors and brothers and sisters. Who stopped that peace being possible? Hamas, from 2005 and again to this very day.
One thing I find really concerning is just how many people seem to sympathize with a terrorist organization, Hamas. You're seeing it in the streets. You know, they claim to be all for the Palestinian people, but the Hamas terrorist group owns the Palestinian people. They're the ones that are controlling a lot of the Palestinians at the moment. They're the ones that in their own charter have, we need to wipe out the Jewish people. Like, that is their founding charter, for goodness sake. People don't seem to care too much about that because they have this veil over their eyes of hatred. Now, I don't hate the Palestinian people. What I hate is terrorism. What I hate is senseless acts of violence and murder. But when you go in and you claim to be something, you're wanting to remove and kill more innocent people, the Jewish people, for doing nothing wrong, as it would seem, that's where I draw the line. I say, no, these people need to be dealt with. You went over and above, and you went way too far. And the consequences as a result of that is what Douglas Murray is pointing out. You've got to deal with them. You've got to say, when is enough going to be enough? Are we going to allow these terrorist organizations or these sympathizers to continue to exist, causing more problems when we know what their real intentions are? Or are we going to actually say, no, you don't deserve to be there or to live? Like, there needs to be that. Someone needs to say it. And I'm glad Douglas Murray said it too. I'm glad that he pointed it out. Like, it's an actual brilliant way of talking about this whole scenario, because a lot of people just go in and say, oh, Israel needs to stop. Okay, say they do stop. Then what? Hamas is still around. Then what? They do another October 7th. Then what? Israel just continues to be wiped out slowly but surely. So if Hamas does something evil like they did with October 7th, and Israel doesn't retaliate, doesn't do anything, just keeps on taking it, you're going to have no Israel left. You're going to have no people left by the end of it. So, you know, the one thing I believe that Hamas has done really well is blindside a lot of people in the media, or not just blindside, but share a version of truth that is not really the truth. Is tell the entire world we're the martyrs here. We're the ones that are suffering. But yet, okay, Israel has been going in, doing their best, I believe, to wipe out Hamas. I know this is a very contentious and a very sticky situation to talk about, and that's why I've you know, not really covered it on this show that much, because I know how controversial it can be. And I don't think that I'm an expert in this at all. I don't want to sound like I'm an expert. All I can do is give my opinion. And I'm not saying that Israel is totally in the clear, you know, but that is the reality of war. Like happened in World War II, for goodness sake. It happens. Until you wipe out evil entirely, you're the good side. But sometimes it feels like you're the bad person, but in reality, you're doing good. To wipe out evil that has convinced everyone else that the good is evil, that's problematic. That's what I mean. Like, good has now become evil and evil has now become good. So anyone that sees good now and tries to do good, evil is going, no, they're actually evil. We're the good people. So just amazes me now. It really does. Douglas pointed out that Hamas could have created a utopia for the Palestinian people. Instead, they didn't. They went down. They lined their own coffers even more. And so the terrorist leaders are essentially billionaires. And I know that the US gave a lot of money to Iran, which Iran is funding Hamas, and it just trickles down, you know, like it just amazes me how much corruption is in the world today. I know from Israel's side as much as US side, and you're trying to scratch your head and go, well, who's really the good one here? And I personally believe that Israel is a good one. They're our only allies in all the Middle Eastern world, which is crazy to think. This tiny nation amongst all these giants. You know, it's almost like David versus Goliath here, as who's going to win. But Rabbi Shmuel Reichman, getting that completely wrong, but my apologies. Another masterclass by Douglas Murray. I have literally never seen a more eloquent, calm, and decisive presentation on live TV. Douglas Murray just fit 100 books and 300 podcast episodes into this 3-minute soliloquy. He completely shut down Piers Morgan's argument, clarifying that Hamas, not Netanyahu, is the true obstacle for peace. And I firmly believe, like from what I've heard, Netanyahu has said that he wants to wipe out all of Hamas, which is a pretty bold statement to make, especially like they're not going to stop until Hamas is totally wiped out. But the thing is, Hamas could have released the hostages. They're still hostages. They're still holding them. And 6 more, I think it's 6 more. I'm forgetting the actual number. Maybe someone can correct me in the comments below. How many people recently, the hostages, passed away that like they killed them? You know, there's still a 1-year-old baby, I think, that's being held hostage, and it's been held hostage now since October 7th. Like, they could have done the right thing, released the hostages, you know, built a utopia, but they chose otherwise. They chose violence. They chose to wipe out or try to wipe out innocent Israeli people. And now Israel is fighting back, but it seems like Israel can't do that because they're the bad ones. He criticized Hamas for using foreign aid to build tunnels and enrich its leaders rather than improving Gaza. But most importantly, he explained that peace with Hamas is fundamentally impossible as they value conflict and death, not peace and life. Thus, unless Israel is allowed to decisively win, the cycle of violence will continue ad infinitum. So the infinity, like it'll just keep going until Christ returns. Thank you, Douglas Murray, for being the absolute most important voice in the world right now to defend Israel and the Jewish people. The amount of people that I have seen that have gone against the Jewish people at the moment because of October 7th is really concerning. Like you're starting to see Candace Owens go in a very interesting direction in regards to the Jewish people, blaming the Jewish people for a lot of things the Jewish people have no real involvement in. But hey, that's another podcast for another time. But anyway, it just like the world is getting worse and worse. And I think as Christians, we have to stand by Israel because I believe Israel is very, very important, especially with end times. But, you know, I know that Israel don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I know they've chosen to reject him on many, many occasions, but like it's nothing new, really. It's nothing really new under the sun, so they say. But yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd give my 2 cents worth on this, if you guys care or not. But follow what Douglas Murray has said, not what I've said, but what Douglas Murray has said. I've tried to explain the best way I possibly can and how I think about this, but I know that I'm not perfect and I know that I can get things wrong. So that's why I'm saying, listen to Douglas. He's a lot better at this than I am. But you guys take care, you be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.